for whatever reason, we like to think to ourselves that, I'm going to accomplish all of my goals in a year, right? Or whatever the short time frame is. And the reality is, like you said, like it's skills compound over time, and the effort that you put in compounds over time. And if you would give yourself 10 years to accomplish your goals, you would A, be more likely to achieve them, and B, enjoy your life more along the way. So that's sort of where I'm at. And I realized, over the last 10 years, I went from being a nobody to being world class, right? And it's an interesting thing that you can do that, right? It doesn't matter what place you're in. If you spend 10 years doing something, you can become world class at it, because most people won't. So yeah, that's where my thinking comes on that.
Yeah, I think definitely too, something, and I don't know how I got this. This came from just me. Sometimes, you read enough stuff and you don't know who to quote, but it really wasn't a quote. You just kind of threw enough good information at you, and then finally you grasp something. And for me, it was this idea that if I give myself a year to do something that's really important, it feels like this really huge challenge. If I give myself 10 years, it feels inevitable, so long as I'm willing to put in the work. And then the question becomes, well, are you willing to put in the work for 10 years? No. Okay, then it's probably not that important.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risked their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and today I have live on the line Wade Galt. Wade, are you there?
I'm here. Happy to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. So where are you calling in from today?
Naples, Florida.
Naples. I got to go there last year during the pandemic. It was a very pretty town. I was not expecting that down there, but it's right outside of the Everglades, right?
Yeah, just outside the Everglades by the beach. So it's not that big of a place, but very, very cool. A lot of nice people, and the beach is nearby, which I love.
So if you want to know my the trigger memory I have for Naples, it's because we travel. When I pulled the slide out in my RV when we parked right at the edge of the Everglades there next to Naples, and I pulled the slide out, and the slide topper exploded off of the side of my RV and caused a bunch of damage on the side of the RV, and I had to drive into Naples like 4 or 5 times to get parts and get
Ooh.
fiberglass repair stuff. And I did fiberglass repair on the side of my RV in an afternoon so I could get the slide in and out. So that's my memory of Naples.
Well, we'll have to get you a better one next time.
Yeah, that, and because we were in the Everglades, I thought mosquitoes were bad in Central Florida, but you get down there, they're like black sky of death that come in and just take your children away. So
It's a good excuse if you're looking like get rid of your children, but yes, it can be a lot.
yeah, awesome. So what I want to do before we get too far into this is just go over your bio for my audience who may not know who you are. So Wade teaches entrepreneurs and professionals to create an abundant and sustainable 3-day weekend lifestyle, which is super cool, so they can better enjoy their family, friends, and life. You could 20-year plus software company founder, business growth coach, and author of books on business growth, finance, personal growth, parenting, and spirituality. He and his family live oceanside in North America and South America, and he enjoys his 3-day weekends and Fridays at the beach playing volleyball with friends, plus weekends with his family. So with that very brief introduction, Wade, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your business is and does and who you serve?
Sure. So I serve entrepreneurs, and my historically, I've cut my teeth or grew up in the insurance agency industry, and those are also entrepreneurs, and they, in some ways, have perhaps a steadier business model than most, but they have a more invested model. So if you're an insurance agency owner, you have a brick and mortar business. Usually, you have people, you are invested. You don't get to side hustle it. You got to do it. And so I've grown up
Yeah.
in that industry, helping them with everything from recruiting, sales coaching, working a 3-day weekend lifestyle, 4-day work week type situation, compensating their team members. That involves the software company that I created to help them compensate and motivate team members and create a great work environment for team members. So all around, just running a small business of anywhere from 5 to 20 people. And that's what I grew up doing. And I was blessed to, and have been blessed to, work with a lot of really awesome people in that business model. If you do it well, you're looking out for people, looking at them help with their basic finances. And then I got to work with the insurance agency owners and just see the pattern that really money's an amplifier. I mean, you're probably have experienced this. If you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
that happy, it's not going to make you happier. It's just going to perhaps have you have happier or cooler toys. And if you are happy, it's going to hopefully create more happy experiences or happy experiences with cooler toys. But at the end of the day, the happiness is separate from the money. And so I got to see how important the time investments were for people, whether or not parents invested time with their kids or not, and what that meant to the kids, how that played out, whether or not business owners would invest time with their employees or not, as far as train them and developing them versus throwing a couple videos at them in a book and say, okay, go to it. So for me, a lot of it's been about helping people grow and understand that if you put in the focus time, you can then usually create a situation where you have time for other things and can balance that. And in my case, my 4 days a week can be kind of hectic and crazy at times. And we have kids, so there's all sorts
yeah.
of things going on and dropping off and picking up. But at the same time, for me, the 3-day weekends, which I do over 90% of the time, is where I get to calm down and be fully present and disconnect from that type A, I guess, superhero ego of mine, and just kind of be the regular guy who just has a family and enjoys basic, simple things.
Yeah, I know. I've been the same way. I have been running my business 4 days a week for maybe 3 years now. A little longer, possibly. I can't remember exactly when I started making that cut over, but I know. And I've talked about this show a lot on this show a lot about one of my fatal flaws was a lack of self care, and it presented mostly in a having a terrible relationship with time. Namely that I was letting my time walk all over me, kind of thing. And I had, um, early in my entrepreneurial career, I thought that the only way to grow was to work more. And since you're never really done as an entrepreneur, I just, worked until I fell asleep, uh, which was not a great way to run your business or grow your business or have a good lifestyle with your family. And I started getting into this idea of what happens if I start applying creative restrictions to my time, right? What happens if I only work 5 days a week? Or what if I only work 8 hours a day? What happens? And eventually that got down to what happens if I work 4 hours a day, 4 days a week? And I found that doing that in my business dramatically increased the productivity that I have because it forces you to focus on what's next. And it dramatically increased my growth and it increased my team size and it increased everything we do in our business by applying those creative restrictions. And then it gives us that ability to have those 3-day weekends all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people think it's easier to work 4 days. It's actually harder, and you know that. So as somebody, if you've done it, because you don't get to do that thing. You talk about your relationship with time. Mine's similar. I'm the I'm the guy that thinks that I can make the 15-minute drive in 5 minutes because everything's 5 minutes, right? So, and then you show up
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes late. Oh God, I thought it was the light, and it's like, no, you're 10 minutes late. It wasn't one light. And as entrepreneurs with time, it's especially if we don't have children or spouses that are saying, "Hey, we miss you," or "Are you ready to do something now?" It's so easy just to keep throwing time at it, and it's not intended to be this obsessive or uh, zero balance lifestyle. It's just meant to be, oh, I'm going to get the result. But as we all know, the results sometimes take longer than we think. And if you don't put a creative restriction on, hey, I'm going to stop work at 6 o'clock every day or whatever it might be, well, 6 o'clock turns into 9 p.m. very quickly. And oops, you
Mhm.
just missed time with the kids. You barely, you stepped inside for dinner. Maybe technically you were there, but you weren't fully there because your head was somewhere else. And so just for me, these are the times as a parent, our children are 15 and 12. These are the times that we most want to enjoy. And having watched a lot of entrepreneurs that make the majority of their income much later in their career, because just like, compound investing, the better you get, usually we're not athletes where
Yeah,
our productivity decreases. We usually get better over time. So I've seen these people where they're making so much money later, and they didn't need as much earlier. They needed more time with their kids, or just with their youth, of being able to do things. I'm about to turn 50.
yeah,
There's things I can't do that I used to be able to do. And so from that perspective, a lot of what I do is help people realize what is most important. And to your point with what you're doing, slowly, very gradually, simply start, putting some time restrictions and getting clear about what is you really want to accomplish, rather than just saying, well, I'm supposed to work 40 hours a week, or I'm supposed to do a certain amount of time in order to feel good, or to feel responsible. And the challenge you give people is, if you're looking at this from the lens of, well, I'm being lazy if I don't work 40 hours, or if I'm in some way slacking, say, okay, well then now, especially if, let's say, you're even as a citizen from volunteering, or as a parent from time with your kids, what might be what might else you be slacking on that's not work? Because if you only look at work, you say, well, then I've got to put all my time there. But if you have other dimensions to your life, and most of us do, and hopefully you do, then you
yeah,
realize if you overwork, you're actually doing it wrong. And people say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought it was hustling. I thought if I'm hustling, I've got to be a good guy. No, you can over hustle. You can do it wrong. You can miss out. There's so many books about dads. There's The Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, the song by Harry Chapin, of people just missing out. And the sad thing is when you see people that miss out, not because they're mean or greedy or selfish or don't love their kids or their family, because they're just distracted. They're just
yeah.
missing a variable. And there's some people that say, no, wait, I just want to keep working. That's a different story. So for me, the people that I really look to make sure I connect with is not so much trying to change people, but the people are saying, wait, I'm trying to do it right. I'm trying to balance it all, but it feels like I'm missing something. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, we think that doing 5 projects is going to get us the best result, when sometimes one is actually going to do that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's helped me the most make that transition over the last several years is redefining what I thought success was, for my day. Not like success in my life, but what a successful day looks like. And it used to be like a successful day was I've gotten as much accomplished as possible, and I realized that didn't lead to the life that I wanted. And so redefining it for me was, and I apply this to lots of things in my life, but it's like I just need to make progress today. And if I made progress, then I've had a successful day. And I do that. I sort of apply that thinking to everything. So like we're working on renovation projects in our RV right now, and when you're living full time in an RV and traveling and doing what we do, doing a renovation project on it while you're living in a small space is very difficult. So it's like, I pulled out like yesterday, I was like, I pulled out like 6 nails that I needed to pull out. I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to move on. Right. Wasn't a big thing, but it's progress. Right. And then later today, I'll probably pull off the Velcro that's all glued down that I need to get done. But it's like, it's little things, little bits of progress. And I do the same thing with my business. Like I'm working right now on a big marketing like piece that's got a lot of little moving pieces that have to go together. And every day I'm just like, okay, I got the video embed done today. Okay, I got the table of contents done today. Okay, I got this other thing done today. And if I get one thing done, doesn't even have to be big. If I get one thing done, I've made progress, and that progress over time snowballs. And I've realized if you make that one thing something that is driving towards your larger goals, um, and make sure it's on that line of these are the things that are important, then you don't have to put in 100 hours a day, because you'll find out when you put in 100 hours a day is obviously hyperbole, but when you put in that kind of time, a lot of what you're doing is not on that important line, and you could get the same result if you took all that stuff out and put that time into the other things in your life that you find valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that if I were to say to you, look, Richard, I'm going to work out once and I'm going to get my perfect body, you'd laugh, I'd laugh. We'd know that that doesn't happen. And yet sometimes in business, we convince ourselves that there's a different set of laws. If you understand farming, we know there's a seasonality, but more than a seasonality, you invest, it takes time, it takes resources, and it grows. And for some reason, we want this shorter path or this quicker path. And yet, as you said, it doesn't happen that way. And definitely for me, when I've looked at my journey just as a human being, whenever I forget that I'm a multidimensional human being, then it's easy to say, "Oh, I made progress in work today. That's all needs to be done." But if I realize, there's a body, a heart, a mind, a spirit, there's all these different parts. There's family, there's friends. And then you realize, "Oh, I didn't do this today. I didn't go for my bike ride today. I didn't meditate today," or whatever it is that makes you happy. Didn't go for a walk in
Mhm.
nature. You realize, okay, well then today I really didn't do it the best way. 10 hours doing one thing and missing out on two or three other things isn't best. And sometimes it needs to be done. As you know, sometimes if we have a deadline that's coming up and we've said we're going to deliver by a certain deadline, there is being an adult and saying, yes, I said I'd do that. And even if it's uncomfortable, I'll make sure I have that happen. But that's very different than having a lifestyle that constantly creates that. And definitely to your point, the more things I put on, then I become fatigued mentally, and then I don't make good decisions. And so sometimes I know for me, there's sort of a time when I know I'm off. If I hit towards the end of the day and I start gravitating towards my social media business account. So again, social media business account. So now I'm productive, right? Because it's business, but I'm still in there. I'm just reading other people's content. There's nothing wrong with strategically going in and supporting my friends who are also posting content. I'm not so extreme as to say, well, if you're reading somebody else's content, you're losing. If you want to have relationships with people, they're not just going to support your post if you don't support theirs. But I'm talking about just going in and kind of like, okay, well, I've got another hour. I've got to be working, so I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to hit click, and it feels like work. And maybe I'm getting a little bit done, but I'd probably be better off just calling it a day and coming in the next day fresher. And to your point, knowing what are those 8 to 10 things? What is that 8 steps I need to take to get to that one project? And did I get another step done today?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it does a lot to really understand what you want out of your life. And there's nothing wrong with putting stuff off in your business to make sure that you are having lunch with your kids, right? That's one of my top things, right? Or, taking a scooter ride with your wife in the morning. And that is an okay decision to make. And I think more entrepreneurs need to give themselves permission to do that. And part of the reason I think that is for whatever reason, we like to think to ourselves that, I'm going to accomplish all of my goals in a year, right? Or whatever the short time frame is. And the reality is, like you said, like it's skills compound over time, and the effort that you put in compounds over time. And if you would give yourself 10 years to accomplish your goals, you would A, be more likely to achieve them, and B, enjoy your life more along the way. Um, So that's sort of where I'm at, and I realized, over the last 10 years, I went from being a nobody to being world class, right? And it's an interesting thing that you can do that, right? It doesn't matter what place you're in. If you spend 10 years doing something, you can become world class at it because most people won't. Um, so yeah, that's where my thinking comes on it.
Yeah, I think definitely too. Something, and I don't know how I got this. This came from just me. Sometimes, you read enough stuff and you don't know who to quote, but it really wasn't a quote. You just kind of threw enough good information at you and then finally you grasp something. And for me, it was this idea that if I give myself a year to do something that's really important, it feels like this really huge challenge. If I give myself 10 years, it feels inevitable, so long
Yeah.
as I'm willing to put in the work. And then the question becomes, well, are you willing to put in the work for 10 years? No. Okay, then it's probably not that important. Raising children, I'm willing to do that. Okay, yeah, I'm willing to put in the work even when I don't feel like it, even when it's not sexy, even when I'm not getting shout outs on social media. Yeah, I'll do that. And so for me, it's
Yeah.
been
Even you get
that.
barfed on in the middle of the night.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But being willing to do that and saying that those are truly the two or three things that are that important, and realizing that the other things come and go. And man, I'm human like everybody else. It's nice to get recognition. It's nice to get told you're awesome. And even as a podcast host, we get these interactions with people, which is kind of almost surreal, where you meet somebody and because the other person on the other side of the mic is somebody who has good intentions and whatnot, and you understand the overall process, you kind of go in deeper and share a little bit more than you would in a normal situation if somebody you just met at a party. Because otherwise, this would be very self-indulgent for you and I to sit here, just be like, well, here's what I do. Here's what I do. I'm awesome. You're awesome. We're all awesome. And yet, it's one of those things that if you're committed to helping people with it, you'll go into that uncomfortable space. And yet at the same time, there's a sense of having to pull back and say, okay, yeah, well, the interview is really fun. As you and I both know, there's the production, the editing, all the other pieces that either you have to do yourself or make money somehow to have somebody else help you do that. And again, are you willing to do those pieces? And if the answer is like, yeah, I'll do that, then great. But to your point about, again, the working that, let's call them the 12 to 15 hour days, what are those things you're doing in those last 3 hours that if you didn't get done, or in those last 5 hours, it wouldn't have mattered? Start seeing how you can take those off, because I can promise you, you're not going to wish you spent less time with your kids. You're not going to wish you spend less time with your friends, with your family, your loved ones, whatever word it is, and also doing activities that you enjoy. I made
Yeah.
that mistake of thinking that as a new father, that the best thing I could do was to stop playing beach volleyball so I could be as present as possible for my wife and our child. And it was almost like creepy, like, okay, Wade, 6 years not playing my sport, and in my case, not having that physical release, not having time with friends, I became grouchier. And grouchy is a very light word for it. So again, with the best intentions, but poor strategy, I was again missing out on even just that day. And somewhere I got this from somebody, the idea, if you have a good day today and a good day tomorrow and a good day the next day, you'll have a good life. And it doesn't have to be this huge, thing on a board with all these accomplishments. And so, yeah, I love your idea of looking to make every day just better, or living it in alignment with who you are, not so much your whole life. The whole life's a lot. You're not going to live that in one day, is what Howard Jones said. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just a little bit of time.
Yeah, and there's two things you said I want to pull out of that. First one was the are you willing to put in the work for 10 years? I love that because I've always tell people, I was like, we vastly overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and vastly underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. I really like that, just like the additional thinking of like, if you're going to do it, are you willing to put in the effort for 10 years? Because if you're not, it's probably not worth doing. And like, I think we run a podcasting agency. You point earlier about all the effort that goes into podcasting, right? And we do all of the work for podcasters, so they don't have to do anything but show up for the interview, which is the fun part. And that's why I run my podcast the way I do, because like I only show up for the interviews. It's the part I enjoy, and my agency takes care of everything else, which is cool. That's my own shameless plug for push button podcasts. But um, the the point there is that like having that system in place allows me to know that like, hey, this show, the Hero Show, is something that I'm willing to put in the 10 years for. Like I will interview people a couple of times a week for 10 years because I enjoy that process and I know the impact that will make, right? Just the body of content that it'll create over that course of time. I'm willing to put in that effort because I have something to back that up, right? I have something behind that. That's the first thing. And then the second thing you said, which I think was really brilliant, um, is learning to take time for yourself, the things that you enjoy. And I think a lot of times, especially as entrepreneurs, we like to imagine that we are selfless, right? And we're giving our value to the world, right? And that's why we run the show, is to show entrepreneurs that that's what they do, right? Because a lot of times that's a problem we have. And then somehow in that process of learning to give the value we have to each other, we forget about ourselves, and forget that, like, to quote the airlines, right? You got to put the mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. And I know, like, you hear all the time, especially in the parenting world, you should like live vicariously through your kids, right? And help them do whatever they want to do. And one of the things that I've held very staunchly to with my kids and with my family is that, like, hey, you are coming along the journey with me on my life, right? And I'm teaching you how to live is what I'm doing, right? I'm not living for you. And so, like, and I get some pushback from other parents on this, but like, if my son wants to be in gymnastics and I want to do something else with myself and like my wife and something that we're doing, and like he has to take off gymnastics or can only do it for a little bit of time, be like, you'll be an adult at some point. If you want to keep doing that, you can practice, you can do your things. When you get to be an adult, we'll help you and support you. But right now, this is what we're doing as a family, right? And just like showing them that you are allowed to pursue your own passions. Like that's part of what life is. And like they're um I don't really know how to put that other than like you are allowed to be important in your life.
Absolutely. And if you don't do that, you'll resent them. There were times where I did resent
Yeah.
my kids, and it wasn't their fault. They're 2 and 5, and I'm
Yeah.
resenting them because as if they did something when it was how my wife and I set things up, primarily me, how I decided I wanted things to be. And when I wasn't getting out of it what I thought I would, then somewhere in my mind it was their fault. And it wasn't their fault. It was me simply making choices like
Yeah.
anything
It
else.
was
You
yours.
make choices, sometimes they don't work out your way, and that's fine. But being clear about what I most want and at least going for it as best as I can and modeling that for our children. And it sounds you're doing the same. And I have a friend of mine, he's been traveling a lot with his kids. And again, just showing them just by demonstration, this is a possibility. You might decide you still want to go back to a corporate job in a cubicle, 40 hours a week for the rest. Great. God bless. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want you to understand that this is a possibility, and I want you to kind of see a little what it is that I do to make it happen. So you won't have to take I mean, you might take a course on a specific tactic, like how to, maximize SEO, but you're not going to have to take a course on how to live life or how to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And, and then you can run with that and do with it, what you like.
Yeah, I like that. I essentially that's the way I approach parenting in general is I'm going to show you how I live life. Right. And if sometimes that means you have to sacrifice some of your things that you want to do now, that's okay. Right. Because that's a part of life too. And when you get to be an adult, you'll know how to run your own life because we showed you. So I want to talk a little bit about your superpowers in your life, right? And we talk on this show, every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's super strength or the ability to call down thunder from the sky or, genius, something like that. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, right? Which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or that you developed over the course of time that really help you, help you slay your villains or help the people in your life slay their villains. Um, and the way I like to frame it is if you look at all the skills that you've developed over the course of your life, there's probably one skill that sort of ties all those together. It's the common thread, like the thing that underpins all of those things. And that common thread is where you find your superpower. So, with that sort of framing, what do you think your superpower is?
Whether it's inside work, outside work, otherwise, I help people not take life seriously so they can enjoy it. So if it's work,
That's
it's not. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say that's an interesting it's an interesting superpower. I've never heard anyone say that on the show. So I want to unpack a little bit and find out what do you mean by taking life too seriously?
Okay. So I was slash am and can be intense. I'm in the old school. They'd say you were gifted, and that's a nice way of saying if you people think, oh, my child's gifted. If you see enough books, and I remember watching Sting, the lead singer of the Police, reading a book, the curse of the gifted child. And like, we're kind of a little nutty. Everything has to be a certain way. Everything's supposed to be perfect. We think we know everything. There's just so many different things, and my daughter's like this, so it's great. I get to see it. I get to, watch it, and so there's a lot of seriousness for me, at least, about how things should be. Real simple, quick story. So I was raised Catholic, and there's so much I've gotten from that. And I'm in, I don't know, maybe second grade, and I'm coming back from Sunday school with my cousin, and we're being dropped off to our house by my aunt, and my cousin's doing cartwheels, and I come to my mom and like, you do not believe what they did to Jesus. They put him on this thing and they put nails in him and there was blood and there was like, I'm like that intense kid. Like the whole thing freaked me out, like of just
Yeah.
the whole story and all of it. And so I'm like, we got to fix this. And there's people starving. So for me, that can awaken my compassion to realize, yes, there are other people and we want to do well with them and help people around the world and help people get food and water and all this stuff. But there's a part to me that gets so serious with that that's like, nope, you know what? I've got to just put my head down for the next 50 years and work as best as I can. And maybe someday something positive will happen. And then with that, and this is an editorial, but I believe there's a level of seriousness people have just in, well, what did you say? You offended me. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? And I'm not talking about people intentionally trying to hurt people. and I am all about trying to use words that are gentler for people, that we don't intentionally hurt people.
Yeah.
But I think there's certain things like I fart sometimes. Shocker. I'm a guy. I'm a person. It's okay. I'm not going to do it in church while the pastor's or the priest is speaking. But if I can't accept some of my humanity, and my God, I'm always on stage and I've always got to be worried about what they're thinking. I've always got to be. And so I meet a lot of people that's what's, and it is the word is driving them. They're not getting to drive their life. They don't have their hands on the wheels. Their insecurities, the tapes in their head, what they've been told, who they're supposed
Yeah.
to be, that's driving who they are. And so they don't get to, just relax on a weekend. And I'm not talking about anything
They
inappropriate or
don't give
weird,
themselves
or
permission to
they
play.
don't give themselves permission to play. Like, no, I've got to do this. See, I'm 49 now, and the world needs to be taken. And yes, there are certain times that if you're an adult, you certainly know there's certain times where you have to show up as an adult and behave as an adult and do certain things. But I just think a lot of people, whether it's the seriousness of the entrepreneur that thinks they need to know everything in their business instead of being able to say, hey, I don't know everything and we are going to figure this out. That person that, the parent that thinks they have to know everything. And so it's because I said so, and I know this and I know that. There's just, and again, I used to think these people were control freaks, and maybe somebody could say, yeah, on some level they perhaps are. But what I would find, and I have this too, that's why I'm aware of it, is it's that sense of love or wanting to do good that gets so passionate that it becomes almost self-deprecating or perfectionist to the point where we won't accept anything less than perfection. And we're humans. It's not going to work out that way. So you're already hosed before you start,
Yeah.
and you're not going to be happy. And so for me, while temporary happiness is certainly not the only measure of life, because there's certainly things you can do that'll make you temporarily happy that are not good in the long run, overall, whether you want to call it fulfillment, joy, some people call it bliss, your default state, if your default state is not happiness or contentment on some level, then to me, we're probably doing something not so accurate or not so, and I don't mean morally wrong, but just not effective, if that makes sense. So I find I help
Yeah.
people do that in their personal life and in their business to say, what's really most important? Let's get those things right. And then the other stuff, we'll do our best, but we're not going to get it all right. And can we allow ourselves that? Because then that allows a whole lot of freedom, to be us and to be imperfect and to be human and to make mistakes and to try. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, if you can't make mistakes, you can't and accept it. You can't be an entrepreneur. You can you
Yeah.
can you can do it once
Failure is
until
the
that
failure is the
first mess
stepping
up.
stones to success.
Yeah.
So there's two things you brought up in your stories there that I want to touch on. One of them is you talked about being a gifted child and or a gifted individual. And I wanted to touch on that because this was a discussion I had with my wife who's got a degree in education, like educating young children. And something that I didn't realize until she pointed it out to me. And so, like IQ comes on a spectrum, right? Of, low IQ numbers all the way up to high IQ numbers. And when you get into the higher IQs, right, like the 120 plus IQ ranges, um, in education, they split those into two different subcategories. One of them they call gifted children, and the other one they call bright children. Right. And so I didn't know this, but it's really interesting to know if you are in the gifted category, because a lot of times you look at yourself and think, well, I'm crazy because I don't act like the rest of everyone else. But so in the category of smart people, the overwhelming majority of people who have high IQs are bright. And the way they define that is like if you ask a bright person a question, they will then give you the answer, right? These are the people that show up on Jeopardy and win $1 million over and over again, right? Because they know all the answers to everything all the time, right? My wife's that way. She's very bright and she knows all the things. Um, and if she doesn't know the thing, she can figure the thing out, right? That's what a bright person does. And then the same high IQ, right? If they're a gifted child, if you ask them a question, what they're going to respond with is not an answer to the question, but they're going to ask you a question. Why are you asking that? What's important about it? Why is it, and they don't give a damn about the answer. what they give they care a lot about is the motivations and the reasons and the underpinnings. And what's interesting about that whole thing is that your gifted high IQ individuals represent generally less than 10% of the population, where the bright individuals represent like 90 plus percent of the population of the smart people. And you definitely know when you have a gifted kid in your life or a gifted person because they're more interested in the questions and the underpinnings than the not. Anyways, I never knew that about myself or knew that they made those types of delineations. And when my wife pointed that out to me, it just sort of helped like click a lot of things into place about how I interacted with the world. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's a useful thing to
Thank
know
you.
about the world.
Yeah, it's not a low maintenance thing, and it's not, we would watch some of the parents, trying to get their kids tested so they could prove they were gifted, so they could be in a certain educational track. And my sister happens to be a teacher, and so she's like, "Wait, no, gifted." And she might have told me, and I might have missed it, because maybe I wasn't as interested in what she was saying. And, but the whole bright versus gifted thing. But the way I tell people, look, I on an IQ test, yes, I would score high. Socially, I was an idiot, and in some ways, still sometimes I'm a little more intentionally not. I mean, laissez-faire about it as opposed to an idiot these days. Like not as concerned, but I think sometimes people think, "Oh, that must be great," and there is that. At least for me, a saying that I had heard years ago was, "For those for whom much is given, much is expected." And so there's kind of that sense of, well, okay, well, you're smart. You must be able to do these things. You must be able to figure out these things, or if you can figure these out. And the thing that I found, at least, that's missing from that is you still really can't change people. People still do what they want to do. So as I like to joke, I have a master's degree in psychology, all this years of coaching, a wife, two children, and two dogs. Not that I have them, but they're in my life, and I still can't get the dog to poop where I want. So that's what all those credentials mean for me. I mean, obviously, there's good to those,
Yeah.
but to be able to make something or force an outcome, that's, I think, the humility of the person that is, whether they're bright or gifted or just can see things, to say, well, yeah, but there's still the people get to choose. And so what we
Yeah.
think might be best or not, you know, might not be able to be
Yeah.
something that we
And
can make happen.
what's interesting too is like, whether you're bright or gifted or not, like all of those things come with their own superpowers and their own fatal flaws, right? Which is a, again, one of the reasons why we talk about this show, talk on this show is about that kind of stuff. But the other thing that you mentioned was you didn't say it exactly like this, but sometimes you have to be an adult, right? You have to adult. And so we talk about how important it is to give yourself permission to play, but the other times you have to really get stuff done. If you said you're going to do something, you need to do it. You have deadlines. You got to make stuff happen. And I think part of the misconception people have in their head about this whole like how do I balance that work life thing is we have the metaphor that always gets used is that legal scale, right? The trying to get your work and life into this weird balance. And the problem I've always had with that is that's it's an impossibility, one, and it doesn't really reflect life well. So it's a poor metaphor. And because it's a poor metaphor, we end up making poor decisions because we base things on that. Like I'm trying to get to this magical work-life balance. And I found for myself at least a much better metaphor is to think of your work-life balance more along the lines of the way that like, a rubber band works. So a rubber band has two states, right? It's either sitting there and it's not doing anything, it's rest, or it's being stretched. And if you want to make forward progress, you stretch the rubber band, right? You let go on one side and it rockets forward. But the state immediately following rocketing forward, state of rest, right? And you have to go back and forth between having the times where you were putting in the effort and doing the things. And sometimes, as an entrepreneur, you're like, I've got to hit this deadline, I got this project done. You might work, 6 days, 10-hour days to hit a deadline, get it all done. But if you keep that pace up, you'll break that rubber band, right? And then
Yep.
it won't go anywhere because you've broken it. um, but like and so on the same time of giving yourself permission to play, right? Take the time of rest. You also have to give yourself permission sometimes to stretch and work hard. Um, and I think that metaphor, at least for me, works a lot better.
Absolutely. I think one of the things, and Batman's a huge, probably my favorite hero in some ways, and I've learned to appreciate a lot of the different heroes, but I just love he's human. But if you do any following of Batman, you realize he goes and then he's got to recover because he's not from Krypton. He's not, he literally has to heal because he just went out and he just, you know, he did his thing for 8, 10, 12 hours or 2 days or whatever it is. And obviously they don't, that's not a lot of your episodes is watching him sleep, but he's human. There's
Yeah.
an understanding that if he doesn't do that, he can't keep up that pace.
Yeah, yeah, and we're the same way, right? We need to take the time, and I'm not sure why it is, but we find, at least in the entrepreneur space, more people struggle with the giving themselves permission to play than permission to work. So that's why we talk so much about the one side. But anyways, that's I think is a better metaphor. So if your superpower is to help people not to take life so seriously, right, and to use the language we were just talking about, give themselves permission to play a little bit. The flip side of your superpower is always the fatal flaw, right? So just like every Superman has his kryptonite, or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. You probably have something you struggled with in your life, something that has kept your business from growing the way that you might like. For me, we mentioned this earlier. I struggled with lack of self care, so it presented as not having a good relationship with my time, not having good relationships with my clients, didn't have good boundaries. Also struggled with perfectionism for a long time, which I thought was a high standard, and you realize that if you're never shipping product, it's actually no standard at all. So it's pretty terrible. But I think more important than what the flaw is how have you worked to overcome it, so people who are listening might learn a little bit from you.
Sure. So for me, it's been somewhat of a level of self acceptance around needing myself to be a perfect dad. So for whatever reason, and dad's a pretty big role, parents, moms, dads, yeah, it's a pretty big role.
Yeah.
For me, feeling I have to do it perfectly to the point that when if I'm away for work, I'd feel like, okay, I'm supposed to be at home. Or if I'm not fully present, in other words, not allowing myself at times. And I've gotten better at this more recently. Perhaps it's because also our children have gotten older and now they're more uh, independent and actually ask for breaks like, hey, I'd like some quiet time or whatnot. And I feel like, oh wow, I get to go work now. So I kind of went so far, and it's a little bit of there's seriousness in there. There's this sense of, okay, I've got to be the perfect dad, otherwise I'm going to screw them up because I'm pretty aware of what can go on. But there's that idea that no matter what happens, again, we're all humans. We're all going to have some sort of wound, uh, whatever it might be. So for me, it's been that self acceptance of, can I accept myself actually as the parent? As am I doing well enough? Because that's where for me initially that answer, which was misguided, was okay, I need to be fully present, fully available. And I almost made making money and progress and success not a bad thing, but like an unnecessary thing. And I can look back and say, well, gosh, you know what, wouldn't have been bad if I added a zero to all my income. That wouldn't have hurt my family. I still value certain things. So I think I kind of thought smaller because I was so afraid of becoming the guy or the entrepreneur that couldn't stop, that I shied away from thinking bigger. So I was afraid, okay, if I think bigger, I'm going to get into something really big. I'm going to get seduced by it. I'm going to get so into it that I'm going to forget about my family and my kids. And so it's that old concept of, hopefully we can move towards something rather than like try to avoid something or move away from something. So for me, it's been more about, okay, how can I simply be the best dad, the best human being, the best person I can do, and help as many people as I can, and be open to what that looks like. And it might be that that's me helping millions of people in a small way, which sounds so, again, exhilarating and awesome. Or it could be something as simple as, I'm going to help 10 people this year, but I'm going to help them in a way that makes a huge impact. So somewhere between that perfectionistic, um, borderline perfect dad, savior complex, have to save the world, have to help millions of people, just that expectation way up here, that the constant measuring of myself was here. So at times, at least as a internal reference point to say, how am I doing? I've always felt I've done pretty well as a dad. Um, but as an entrepreneur, at times I made it harder on myself than it needed to be because I created these standards, almost like maybe even the way Superman would approach the world of, no, I have to be perfect because I'm from another, like I've, instead of acknowledging, yes, there's still these parts in me. that aren't going to be perfect. So just being hard on myself to the point, and again, being too serious with myself, taking myself too seriously. I saw something recently on a post by Dr. Daniel Amen, which I thought was great, and he called it the 18-40-60 rule. He says at 18, uh, you don't care, excuse me, you're worried about what everybody thinks about you. At 40 years old, you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And at 60, you realize nobody was really thinking about you that much in the first place. You're just, not in
Yeah.
a bad way, but it's not like everybody's looking at you like, what are you doing? What do so from that perspective, just taking life a little less seriously is my challenge. That's why I guess I'm so in tune with that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting place to be because there is because what's interesting is like nobody put those expectations on you either way. You put those on yourself, right? And they were internal expectations, and we all do that. Whereas like this is how how I expect myself to be as a dad, and this is how I expect myself to be as an entrepreneur. And a lot of that comes from like the stories we either hear or we tell ourselves or have been told about like what does a successful entrepreneur look like. And a successful entrepreneur is, they're pouring oil on the ducks and they're ignoring their family and they're sacrificing everything for the dollar, right? Which is, I mean, it's a sad story, but it's also not a true story. Like there can be people who do that, and that's it's a story that people can choose, but it's not the only one, right? And it's interesting that we have those like internal like I can't push myself in the entrepreneurial space because I might end up in this story. But what's interesting is like the moment that you choose to think like, well, I can still be successful, but I don't have to follow that path. It's like you've already made a different choice. um, and the same thing with being a father, because I got four kids. My oldest is just about to be 12 in a couple of weeks, which is crazy. I'm not sure I'm ready for a teenager. But the the like I constantly have that thought in my head, like how badly am I royally effing them up, right? Because especially because we're doing really different stuff than
Yeah.
quote unquote normal families, because we're traveling full time, they're living tiny, they're moving all over the place, they got friends all over the world, kind of thing. Like that's not a normal thing, and like so I regularly I get asked the question from other people who aren't living my life. They're like, how are you handling this parenting thing doing what you do? So I constantly sort of have to like answer that question just as a regular part of life because of what we've chosen to do. um and realizing that like the expectations that I think one of the benefits I have is that there's not a lot of expectation like in my head about how a family should be run or how you should be a dad in this situation, because there's not a lot of stories to reference on it. So it's like a sub benefit that I don't have these like, I don't know, stories that I'm holding myself up to. It's just like charting my own path kind of thing. But I definitely see the like in the entrepreneur space, I do that a lot too, where I'm like, I know I don't want to end up in this place, and I always have to come back to like, what are my rules for success? And can so what I do is I always work on, can I ask myself a better question, right? How can I get that goal, right, and still achieve these things, right? How can I, double my business this year and still have lunch every day with my kids, right? And then when you start asking yourself questions like that, you start realizing that, hey, you can write your own story.
Yeah, that's so huge for me. Is I look at when we were moving back and forth to Peru. My wife's from Peru, and what we would do is, since they're south of the hemisphere, their summer is our winter. And so what we would do is we would rent out our place here and go down to Peru. And the first couple times we had to put some of our stuff in storage so we could rent our place furnished. And after a while, each time we would declutter more. And so we kind of got used to going back and forth. And it was a very cool process. Enjoyed it a lot. And I just look at that. First of all, just the idea that we did that is something that, like you said, not traditional, not what a lot of people are doing. And yet there were so many beautiful things we got to experience as a result of that. And yet it was something that, if I had held myself to what it's supposed to look like, it would have been very difficult to do that, because some of the decisions we made no financial sense, but they made life sense. And that was, something we were moving towards. That was a very clear thing to us. Like, we're going to move towards this. And at certain times it costs us extra money. But then, at least from my experience or my perspective as an entrepreneur is, I don't know how much money I'm supposed to make or not make. Sometimes money shows up and I wonder how the heck it got here. And sometimes I work my tail off and nothing comes back. So this idea of pretending I have the wisdom to know what's going to sell, what's not going to work. If I knew what was going to sell, obviously I'd only work on those projects, or, what's going to impact people. I'd only do those things. So I think that's the part, the living in uncertainty, the being okay with it, and perhaps not being too dogmatic. So, just as a simple example, gosh, maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago, I decided to start eating vegetarian, and I'd been looking at that for years. And one of the things that really pushed me over is just I have more energy. My body type, I don't do as well with red meat. I love the taste of it, but I get really, sluggish after it and whatnot. And then eventually I moved towards, a few years ago, eating more vegan. And the funniest thing to me is some of the people who are the most critical of vegetarians are intense vegans. Like, you know how bad it is to kill the animals and what, and it's this whole intense thing. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not throwing stones. I got a lot of stuff I've done in my life that is less than. I'm not always nice to people. Like, there's so many different things. And, some people say, well, what do you do if you go to a party and somebody made pizza and that's all they have there? So, well, eat the pizza. I'm not here to preach to people on how to live their life. I'm trying to eat healthier. It gives me more energy. I can see where it's more compassionate. There's different things. Even if you hear me, like, again, I'm not trying to sell but it's something that works for me. But again, it's that intensity that sometimes the idealist, the person that wants to change the world, has, where it can be very hard if people don't agree with me and validate what I'm saying. And yet, what I'm finding more and more, and this was even the thing with, like, to your point about, redefining who I choose to be as a dad, is just to be comfortable with the fact that, yes, I spend a lot of time with my kids and do a lot of other cool things. And yes, I will tell inappropriate jokes in front of my children. And it's okay for me. That's okay. And
Yeah.
everybody's got their thing. I am not perfect. I've written books on spirituality and I could not. And God, if I could live up to, a fifth of what I've written, that'd be awesome. So, there's just so many things, I think, where when we can, there's this liberation of the entrepreneur from people, to time, to say, okay, I don't want to be told what to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do with my time. And almost the first impulse, it's almost adolescent. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And any entrepreneur knows that you've got to have more than that motivating you to be an entrepreneur. You're not going to make it alone just on that. Even the people that are successful, they'll say, well, but I'm going to be the best at something, or I'm going to be better. I'm going to prove it to you. There's something more. And so we're usually looking for that freedom. But I think what happens is a lot of us can be told this is only a one-dimensional or two-dimensional thing. This is about money freedom and time freedom. Okay, but what about life freedom? What about how you live your life, who you choose to be, how you choose to relate to people, the impact you choose to make in the world, and getting to be free of whether or not what you do is going to get a lot of likes on Facebook or Instagram or not. And again, not looking to be a rebel, because the rebel's never free. The rebel has to rebel. So the rebel's not free, because if I say white, the rebel's got to say black. If I say chocolate, the rebel's got to say vanilla, or whatever it might be, as opposed to the person that says, no, I'm truly free. I like doing this. And no, I don't like doing that. Or yes, I may practice being a vegan, but today it's this person I love made this dish and it has meat in it. And you know what? They put their heart and soul into it. And I don't have to be like, well, hey, let me tell you about, I can just be like, wow, thank you for that gift. And I think that's the part, that's the level of freedom. And I still don't know how to express it, but the best way I'd put it, it's something that I believe I believe there's a God. I believe it's divinely given. I believe it's something that is a self-love, a self-acceptance, an acceptance of what's going on. And I think that energy, whatever that is, when that inspires entrepreneurs, when that inspires change makers, when that inspires employers, parents, wow. And that's the
Yeah.
best way to put it. That's what I try to bring. And so sometimes for me, the only way I know to reach people is with an inappropriate joke, is for them to just laugh, because they're like, and then sometimes you just catch them and you hit their like 18-year-old that, like, that's funny. And they just start laughing and they're trying to be so serious. So I love, like, for me, like, my superhero reel would be taking really, really serious people with the doilies and everything and getting them to not take life so seriously, not just to say, I got you to laugh at a fart joke or something, but to be like, to give themselves a break. and to just be like, hey, it's going to be okay. We're all doing our best.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I like, we tell inappropriate jokes around our kids all the time too. And what's funny is like my son's just gotten to the point where he's starting to get them, and it's really funny.
It's a
And he's
joy.
starting to tell them too. Yeah, it's a joy. I'm like, oh, he's growing up. But I I wanted to tell you just a short story about something that happened to me a number of years ago. It has to do with the whole like the expectations that we hold ourselves to on our head, and then how they express themselves in reality. And it was a negative experience I had with another individual who didn't quite understand what was going on in my life, right? And so my kids, I spend an obscene amount of time with my kids because of what we do and how we live our lives, and where I've gotten to in my life and business. We have a lot of time together, and we spend a lot of time adventuring and all this kind of stuff. And we were at a campground where they were doing karaoke, and my wife was up singing a song, and my young daughters were on the dance floor in front of her, spinning around and dancing and have a good time. And I'm sitting in the back of the room. They got like the karaoke book, right, where you can like flip the pages and look and see like which song you want to sing. I'm terrible at karaoke, just the worst. My wife should probably win awards when she sings, not me. But I was looking through the book trying to find a song that I thought I could actually like pull off, and wasn't paying a lot of attention to my kids because my kids are incredibly well behaved and they're having fun. They're dancing, to mom singing, and you know they I don't know, it's like two songs in. My wife's gone up a couple of times, come back, a few other people have sung, and I'm still flipping through the book looking for a song because I haven't found one that I think I could actually sing. And, my wife's up for her second or third song, whatever. And this older gentleman comes over and he puts his arm around me and he goes, son, I just want to tell you something that I think will like help your life out. And he's like, I've watched the way you interact with your kids over the last 20 minutes or so. Never met me before, doesn't know anything about my life. And he says, you're the worst father I've ever seen. You don't pay any attention to your kids. You should take some time to pay attention to your kids. And I was just like, hit me like a ton of bricks because like that's every father's worst fear, right? That you're like not actually spending any time with your kids or doing things like that. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, whoa, dude, first off, why would you say that? But second, like, you don't actually know anything about me. You don't know where I'm at with all of these things. And because it hit me so hard, I had to talk to my wife about it and actually like, reevaluate, am I actually doing things well? And my wife is like, seriously, you're one of the best guys I know and best fathers I know, like, don't worry about that guy, he's an idiot, which is true. um, but in my own head I still had to deal with that expectation in my life that I'm doing a terrible job as a father. And we all have in our heads, we have that room full of the negative thoughts, the bad ones that we're like, I don't know why these are here, but I can't get rid of them. So maybe you lock them up in a box somewhere and they're all dusty back in the corner, but they're there. And I realized like one of the things that I have to do when I'm looking at those negative expectations in my life is I have another spot in my head that just to the point of this show, I call it my heroes like throne room kind of thing. And I go back through and like the foundational memories, like the statues that you're working on. Right. This is myself as my family. And this is, what I'm doing for my business and how I'm working as an employer and how I'm doing these things. And I have to remember a lot of times when I'm dealing with the negative thoughts to go back in and be like, okay, here's who you actually are, right? Because you're not defined by what you think, you're defined by what you do and the actions that you take. And I think a lot of times we miss that, and we think we are our thoughts, and we're not our thoughts. We are our actions, because the actions are what build our life. So, anyways, that's just one of the ways that I personally deal with some of those expectations that we have in our head that we struggle with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know for me, I know I at least can say that I graduated from, I've played cars with my son when he was younger and been Sally with the cone on her head, for those of y'all who know the movie Cars, while he had literally, I kid you not, 70 cars next to him, wouldn't share a damn one of them with me. And I've done that to the point where, yes, I've earned my at least for that age and stage of his life, I've earned my dad badge there. Like, yes, I can sit here with my son and be Sally with the cone on her head. No offense to Sally either, but come on, at least give me sporty Sally, take the cone off something. And yeah, so from that perspective, I think you're right on being able to decide what's your, at least not even standard to hold yourself or judge yourself by, but at least to aim for.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to move on a little bit and talk about the flip side of your sorry, it's actually not the flip side. What I want to talk about is your common enemy. So your common enemy is, every superhero has their arch nemesis, right? And it's the thing that you constantly have to fight against in your world, right? So just like Spider-Man, always fights to save New York, or Batman's fighting to save Gotham, or Google fights to, um, whatever it is they're doing. In the context of business, I like to put it with your clients, right? So it's the people that come to you and read your books or go through your podcast, your things that you're dealing with, to help people. It's a mindset that you have to help them overcome regularly, that you're constantly fighting against. That if you had your magic wand and someone signed the dotted line with you, if you could just pop them on the head and that mindset was gone, and you could help them achieve the result they came to you just that much quicker. What is that common enemy that you have to fight against?
It's somewhere, it stems from self-judgment, or what we've been talking about, of having somebody else define what your success is, even as a business person from a money standpoint. And the choice is really, what I need to help them do is get clear of what their vision is. And it sounds so simple, it almost sounds cliche, but really get them clear about what is it that's really important to you. Not what's even my vision. Forget, you might not want to work 4 days a week. You might want to work 6 days a week. That's fine. But what does it look like? And for me, it usually starts with impact. Who do you want to impact? Forget, because the money will come as a result of the impact. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes
Yeah,
you can do things that impacts people and it doesn't make money. But then, and those are, for me, are hobbies. So you might still have that. But who is it you want to impact? What sort of income do you want to make? And what sort of work do you want to do? And about how much do you want to work? So, so you can have time for life. If you get clear about those things and you get those right, nothing else matters. But usually what happens is people are looking at, how many followers do I have? Did I hit the company goals? Did I, whatever it might be, all these different measures that are not impact, income, uh, type of work I'm doing, and then, free time. In other words, to have a life. Now, and that's sort of, that leaves out one part, is that somewhere over here, which I believe is the very first thing, is you first decide what type of life do you want to have outside of work.
yeah,
When I ask people, there's an exercise I have clients do, and say, okay, what are the 20 most positively impactful things that have happened in your life? Write them down if you would. And and there's a couple things to it, but the main thing is, where did they happen? And usually at least 80% of them or more, usually 90%, happened outside of work. And so if
hmm
outside of work is where life, memories, if that's where that happens, well, then us spending more time at work and increasing that seems like a very foolish thing to do. So it's one of the basic premises I'll tell people: look, if you only have 1 day per week where you can enjoy life, you only have Sundays off. Well, getting to having Saturdays and Sundays off, you've literally just doubled your memorable lifespan, if that makes sense. If, assuming you die at the same
yeah,
time, you're going to die anyway. And if you get, same concept, you get to 3 days, and of course, it's just a concept, but it's about, outside of work, most people understand what that can look like. And then inside work, saying, okay, now let's do that same thing: the 4 days, the 3 days, the 5 days. What would it look like for you to be now making things that would now show up on your 20 most impactful things, where, yes, I helped this amount of people with my work. I helped these people liberate themselves. So a lot of it is helping them, very similar to what you're doing, helping them see themselves, helping them not just see their zone of genius, but what could their superhero vision, what could that look like if they fully believed in themselves, if they were willing to do that, if they were willing to take a risk, knowing that, yes, there are still bills to be paid, there are still things that need to get done. But there's a lot of the times, at least even in marketing budgets, that we throw things, throw money at something and hope it works. Or in courses, we'll take 10 courses when we only needed one, and we're delaying because, like you said, the perfectionism thing. Well, I'm not going to release it yet. Well, no, you release something and maybe iteration 5 will be good enough. But helping them get that vision that's true enough to them, and then simple enough and reasonable enough that they can start acting upon it. And then sometimes there's a transition period, because maybe they are working 60, 70 hours a week, and it is earning the income, and the kids are at a certain stage and the family's a certain stage. So it's like, okay, wait, how do I now dial this back? And very often that's first finding those things, as you did, of setting some time constraints and saying, okay, well, let's just work 60 hours for the next month and a week instead of 70. And at 60 and 1 minute, cut off and show back up on Monday. And let's look back and see, what are the 10 hours of extra stuff that you really didn't need to do. And let's, unlearn this habit of just throwing labor at stuff But overall, yeah, getting clear on what is their vision that they most want, and simple enough that they can start acting upon it.
Yeah, I always tell people you have to get clear on the monster you want to build, right? And because businesses are they're monsters, and if you want to be a Steve Jobs and build an Apple computer that serves 2 billion people and is iterating on the most technologically advanced devices every couple of years, your business is going to look very different than someone who's like, I want to do um, life coaching and or whatever it is, and like I'm looking to impact people through my books or whatever. Like you have to sort of know what your goal is, and how that grows in. And like I have a friend of mine. He used to be a client, but we've just become good friends over the years. And he's talked to me a number of times about like his business. He's in real estate, and he makes a metric crap ton of money, like the kind of money that makes me just like I'm like I don't even know how you make that kind of money, like more money every month than I make every year, and I make pretty good money. And he always looks at me. He's like, I'm jealous of your life. He's like, because you thought about what you wanted to do with your time more than I did, and my business has me trapped, right? And he was like, you have more freedom than me, even though I make 10 times the money you make. And it's a really interesting place to be, right? Because I started off earlier than he did, and he started to change a lot of his business and fix things so he could have that freedom now. But if you don't start off with that, like, how do I want my business to fit into my life, and not let me build a business and then I'll figure out my life later, then you're starting off on, I said not necessarily the wrong path, but like you said earlier, maybe an inefficient path. There's better ways to accomplish that stuff and not miss out on life, because right, you can always make more business or more money. You can always grow a new business, but what you can't do is you can't get back those Saturday football games with your kids, right? You can't get back the lunches that you missed with them, right? That you can't rewind that time. You can't, like I said, my son's turning 12, and it almost makes me emotional to think about, but like I've been there every day for him. I haven't missed anything, right? And that is, to me, it's the most important thing I could do. So I'm really excited that that's happened, but I wish more people took the time to work that out in their lives so they don't have the regret, right? So, anyways, that's sort of my
Yeah, well,
thinking on
and
that.
that's why for me the how we see ourselves and being tough on ourselves extends into, well, I'm supposed to be pretty, I'm supposed to this, I'm supposed to that, and all the extra expenses on stuff we don't need. Whether it's, no offense, but the basic premise of the cosmetics industry was, let's tell you you're not enough, and then let's sell you some stuff. There's a lot of industries that,
Make you
for
feel
the
better.
most part,
Yeah.
are that's the premise of it. And you say, well, look, if you'll, I see, I was blessed. I grew up a dork. I grew up a socially trombone, braces, butt cut, and later on, I learned how to interact with people and become reasonably popular enough, whatever the word is. But I got to know very quickly that my friends were my friends. They weren't friends with me because I was good looking, because I was popular, because this, that. And so I got to see through a lot of the nonsense. So to me, a lot of that nonsense isn't important. And I'm not saying I'm better than people. Some people, I have a friend that says, Wade, I was very popular very early, and then it's very seductive. It's you're being told, hey, we want to do this or do that. It's like success. People tell you you're great, and then you want to just keep being on stage instead of realizing, that there's times to be on stage and times to not. And so for me, a lot of people, if you're one of those people that's saying, well, I'm making so much money, I don't have, I can't get out. And say, well, who says your expenses have to be what they have to be? Who says you have to live where you have to live or drive what you have to drive? And at some point, if you don't do the inner work of who you are as a person and what's most important to you, then everything else is a distraction. I mean, one of the main reasons why people, like successful entrepreneurs, really successful entrepreneurs, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure entrepreneurs, don't have the lifestyle that they want or that they say they want, is because they're so busy either proving, or they've got a lot of pain in their past and they don't want to think about it. And if they slow down, they're going to have to think about those things, or just, whether it's something that happened to them, parental relationships with kids, whatever it might be, or just insecurities in general, not liking themselves. So it's actually not an easier journey. I've had quite a few people. I don't know if you've had this happen before. People like, you know, almost make fun of me for being a lifestyle entrepreneur as opposed to I want to make as much money as I can as quickly as possible entrepreneur, as if there's only one flavor. And there's so many flavors and each has its, spot. And as I've told people, look, right now, kids are 15 and 12. I'm still a lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm ramping myself up to be travel more, digital nomad, and do different things. And then perhaps, yes, scale, or maybe not, or I don't know, maybe I'll just become a teacher, whatever it is, but allowing that freedom. And I think that's the thing of at the end of the day, this is still about who we are and who we choose to be and who do we want to be and who do we want to show up as and what experience do you want to have every day? Is it going to be this one of constantly measuring yourself against something and seeing that you're beneath it and saying, I'm not good enough? Or is it constantly looking at and just saying, okay, here's where I am today and I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday, or even, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm a little bit worse than I was yesterday. But at the end of the day, it's all going to be okay. And I have good people around me that care about me, or as best as I can. I have two people around me that care about me, and I care about them, or I don't. And I'm finding people that I care about, and I'm going to build relationships, whatever it is. But that's the more important part because most of the everything else, the followers, the likes, the money, is trying to get that stuff. So first, go for the happy life, and then add income to it and whatever, as opposed to or add ridiculous amounts of income if you can. Awesome, but to try to replace the happiness, the fulfillment, the joy, the friendships with ridiculous amounts of income. It's such a it's been done so many times and ineffectively that hopefully we figured that out.
Yeah, yeah, and it reminds me of something I read in a history book one time. And I can't remember what history book it was, but they said you can always tell the rise and fall of empires when the people don't have food or sex, right? Like that really struck me because you realize that like it's connection and sustenance. Like if you have those two things, those are the things that as human beings we actually really care about, right? Because the rise and fall of empire is not like is everyone rich or poor. That's not it. It's do they have food and sex, right? And when those two things get messed up, that's when empires fall. And I know that's like it's a very strange example to bring up, but that's the reality of like what's important to people.
I love that. I've always said my hypothesis to end all wars is every guy, and it's a little bit towards males because usually the males were the ones causing the wars.
Yeah, that's true.
A beer, a football game, whether that's you're an American watching American football or you're in any other part of the world watching football, or as we call it soccer here in America, and a little bit of action. No guys going to
Yeah.
war. If they get that every week, no, why would I pick up a gun, man? I'm happy. So that's the really simple plan for world peace.
What is it? What is it? Jeff Foxworthy says, "Give me a beer and let me see something naked."
There you go. Done.
That's solved all the world problems right there. Oh man. So I want to talk. I'm going to skip a couple of questions I have here because we've been talking for a while, and I want to talk a
Sure.
little bit about your hero's tool belt, which is the I call this the practical portion of my show. And just like every superhero has their tool belt with awesome gadgets like batarangs or web slingers or the big magical hammer they can spin around and fly with. I'm going to talk about the top one or two tools you couldn't live without in your business. Could be anything. Could be the notepad you use to keep track of your thoughts, your calendar, marketing tools, something you use to actually do your product delivery, something you think is essential to the work that you do.
Okay, cool. So, on a very practical level for my podcast, Acuity, the scheduling tool, Calendly is like that, just something that does the scheduling and automatically makes sure that the scheduling happens. That's as far as appointments, podcast interviews, that sort of stuff. It's a very simple tool. It's a very inexpensive tool. That's a huge one for me. As far as another tool it's not one particular intervention, but Audible. So listening to great audiobooks and keeping my mind in the right place, being on top of that. When I don't do that, I lose track a little. And when I'm doing that, even if, and I'm not always specifically implementing what's in the book, but just listening to people that have a good mindset. And it could be Audible slash podcast somewhere in there, podcast app, as far as just
Something that's keeping your mind engaged.
keeping my mind full of good things. And other than that, there's a couple tools. I love Podmatch for finding guests
I
on
think that's how we found each other.
podcasts. That's how you and I found each other. I love Podpage, which helps put together my podcast page very quickly and pulls it in. I love Kajabi, which hosts my online courses. I'm getting to love Circle, the online community software. So for me, a lot of it's softwares and tools that makes things easier. But I guess probably my favorite one would be whatever it is, whether it's Zoom or Zencast or something that just lets me to connect with people. Because to me, connecting is this interaction, talking with awesome people, and now as a podcast host and as a guest, doing that, that's probably been the biggest positive shift in my business in the last 10 years. Because I used to have to go to a retreat or a workshop or something to find that. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes you come back from a workshop and you want to implement everything when really all you needed was to connect with some of your, if you're a solopreneur, if you work from home, or if you're a small business entrepreneur, you need that connection with other entrepreneurs just to make sure you're not just all crazy, and connect with people. So for me, I'd say
It's a good way to
it's
put it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to point something out to you that I think is hilarious, because I ask that question on every interview, and probably 80% of the time, and we're up to like 200 interviews. This is like 180 interviews probably. When I ask a question, most important tool, it comes back to something related to the calendar, right? Whether it's their scheduling, the calendar they have, the calendar they have on their table, when they have their planner calendar. And I find it interesting because I remember a couple of years ago, I told my mom and my stepdad that entrepreneurs live and die by their calendar. And my stepdad told me I was crazy. He was like, it's insane. You shouldn't do that, because like they're not entrepreneurs. And I remember thinking, I was like, but that's like I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for my calendar. Like my calendar, like we're to the point where like I've got my family calendar and I've got my work calendar, and my kids all have the access to the calendar on their devices. And like if they need me for something, like they know to put it on dad's calendar, because it blocks my time out from everything else.
Well, but that's it
And
depends how you use it, because you're using it as
yeah,
a filter. If some people just say, let anybody schedule anytime, that's what I love about Acuity, or like what you're saying. If you block out those times, that's what helps me remember to not lose, my center.
yeah, yeah. Not lose your center and realize like what are the things that are important. Like, and I've got like all sorts of like tags I use on my calendar, because I'm using a digital calendar, and it talks to I can't remember, I think we use Schedule Once, which is similar to Acuity. But like I have tags that I'll drop on the day, but like driving day, and it blocks all the day off, so people can't book appointments on it for when we travel. Or like anything, like if my wife puts something on there like, hey, we're doing dinner with our friends, it goes on the family calendar. If it's on the family calendar, whatever that event is plus 2 or 3 hours in either direction, it blocks everything off automatically. And so like the calendar is really important. And I find that's it's a very common thing for entrepreneurs to in order to do the work that we do, because it's very, it's very intense. Right. And that's why we talk a lot about giving yourself permission to play. That sometimes you have to put on your calendar, like, I'm playing today. Like, that's what we're doing. Like, we got this Saturday, we're going out with friends on the boat. That's on the calendar.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But yeah, that's definitely a cool thing for today. And I've been super impressed with the way technology has gone over the last couple of years, because I remember, when I was a kid, we used to look at things in like TV shows and be like, it would be really cool if we could, like, instead of being on a phone call, we could like have a video call. And like now our businesses run on video calls, which is just insane.
Absolutely.
To think about where we're at. And I know our kids' world is going to be completely different than ours. I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to like holographically jump into each other's minds before the next couple of years are out. But um, it'll be crazy.
And now, a quick word from our show's sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show.
So, I got a couple more questions for you, then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
So, I want to find out about your own personal heroes. Right. So, just like Frodo had Gandalf, or Luke had Obi-Wan, or Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad, or even Spider-Man had his Uncle Ben, I want to talk about who some of your heroes were. Were they real-life mentors, speakers, authors, maybe peers who were a couple of years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you have accomplished so far in your business?
Sure. So my first two were my parents. I'm blessed for that. My father's an entrepreneur and showed me that you can have a life that involves freedom and you choosing to do what you want to do with your time. Didn't tell me, showed me. He continues to demonstrate that. My mother, who is somebody who's always been reading about spirituality, psychology, human things. How do we love each other better? How do we live better? And has always inspired me to be in that conversation. So those are, I'd say, the first two. As I've grown up, interestingly enough, my sister and my brother. My sister is very much somebody who tries to bring people together and build community and help people. My brother, who's also an entrepreneur, is just so committed to growth and excellence and being his best and helping other people. So just from my core, I mean, those are my four. That's my nuclear family. Um, my wife is an awesome person in that she is, I was about to say she's a utility belt. She's willing to fill in the spaces. She has a master's degree. She's willing to be a stay-at-home mom for all these years and do like whatever it is. Like she will put her time into what's most important and valuable. So in that sense, I'm very grateful in that. And then I have people, I'm a huge fan of, gosh, there's so many works. I love Sting, of the lead singer of the Police, what he's done as a musician, what he's done in the world to help people, kind of like Bono. A huge fan of Jesus and his work. 30% market share 2,000 years later. Great job. I've read a lot of him, but I've also read the Tao Te Ching. I've learned from Buddhism. I've learned from Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Debbie Ford, all sorts of different people, Pat Flynn, Brennan Burchard. There's a lot of people I've learned from, of just how to better live life. And some of the later mentors have been more specific, or Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach, very specific mentors too, being an entrepreneur. And so more perhaps tactical, whereas some of the other mentors were more about living life and enjoying life. I guess the best way I'd put it is, for me, when I'm at my best, I'm open to seeing that in many places, as opposed to it being just one person. And that's kept me on track to know that, in my experience, has been most heroes definitely have their tragic flaws too. And so I've experienced those where I put a hero up at a pedestal and they were perfect. And then, you see the tragic flaw and they're like, oh, well, they're human too. And then it goes the other way. And it's like, well, no, just take what's good from them. So yeah, so I'm blessed to have a lot of people, and I'm probably missing, a lot that I haven't even thought of, but blessed, very blessed.
I find it interesting whenever I ask that question, the how often moms, dads, teachers, husbands, wives come up as heroes. And I always think about like my dad was like, I hit the jackpot with my parents. They were just amazing. And I don't know, because I didn't do anything for that. Like that's just luck of the draw kind of thing, I guess. And
You were a good swimmer.
But I was a good swimmer, yeah. But my parents were my parents aren't perfect, right? And they have their own things. And I remember learning early on that, like, if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I wasn't going to be able to watch my dad, right? Because he was not an entrepreneur. So I had to have like other heroes in that space, and find different people. And you find some entrepreneurs that are really good, and you're like, wow, their family life sucks. You're like, so I'm not going to pay attention to their thoughts on how they're living their family life. And so you realize that, like, hey, you have to understand that people are people, and they can be a hero, and they can also have things that you're like, I'm not interested in learning from in that area. And so you learn to pick your influences, as you grow up, which I think it's an important skill.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so last question for you. Guiding principles. One of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code, right? For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He only ever puts them in Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up, I'm going to talk about the top one, maybe two principles that you live your life by. Maybe something you wish you knew when you started out on your own entrepreneurial journey.
The most important one, I'm not sure wherever I got this from, was the idea of consideration. And that's, if there's one thing I can teach my children, it's that. And I try to do that as an entrepreneur. Consideration in the sense of consider the other person. So whether, it's some combination of empathy, treating other people the way, first perhaps the way you'd want to be treated, and then eventually evolving to the point where you're like, oh, actually the way they would want to be treated, assuming it's a healthy
Yeah,
thing and whatnot. So really just considering other people. So for me, um, if I had the magic wand, it would be food, water, clothing, shelter, safety for everybody on the planet. I think that's something that when we as entrepreneurs tap into that level of, and it can look different. Mine's just one vision, but when we're able to do that, that makes a big difference. And when I'm able to come from that place of trusting God, the universe, well enough to say, okay, I'm going to do what is high impact, what's going to make a good impact on people's lives positively. Doing a podcast, a long game like you're doing, things that we can't always prove right away. It doesn't always cash out, but in the long run, hopefully is planting good seeds. So I'd say consideration definitely is more of that perhaps softer skill. And then on
yeah,
the other side is just determination, that you're just going to do something until it gets done. If it's that important, not that you force it, because there might be sometimes we say, okay, that wasn't my call, and you thought something was something you're supposed to do and it didn't work. But assuming that the main reason why it's not happening is not because you've gotten some grand sign that says, no, you're not supposed to be doing this, but that it's just hard work. That, well, yeah, you can still, despite the 3-day weekends, you can still decide this is worthy of it. So whether as a parent that's worth putting in the effort, whether as an entrepreneur to say, yes, it's worth making an impact on people's lives and doing the work. So yeah, building consideration and persistence.
yeah, yeah. And one of my live by quotes is, um, I can't remember if it's one of the guys from World War One, but it's never ever 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 give up, right? And that persistence to keep going, that um, makes you uncompetable. Like, people can't compete with you in the marketplace because most people are willing to give up. And if you're just the one who's like, nope, I'm gonna keep going, right? Maybe you change courses, maybe you shift gears, um, but it's only when you stop or quit or give up that you aren't going to make the impact you're looking for. So I love that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a good place to wrap the interview. But I do have one little challenge I run at the end of every episode that I call the Heroes Challenge, and I do this to help get access to stories I might not otherwise find on my own, because not everyone's out there on Podmatch or other places looking to do interviews like you and I might be. So, do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine, and why do you think they should come on our show and share their story? First person that comes to mind for you.
I'd say Alex Sanfilippo with Podmatch, just because he has, in such a short period of time, well, who he is a tremendous high character individual. And so on the surface, it'll seem like, well, he just started a business in a year and it's doing so awesome. But of course, he's done other work before that puts him in the position to be that guy. But Alex Sanfilippo, I think, is an awesome human being and a brilliant entrepreneur who is growing, still evolving, and yeah, just awesome.
Awesome, cool. So we'll see about I recognize the name. I feel like we may have already talked to him. I don't know that though, so I'll have to do to double check on our things. 'Cause we've done a lot of episodes.
Sure.
Um, but The in comic books, there's always the crowd of people at the end who are clapping and cheering for the acts of heroism. So our analogous to that on the show is, as we close, where can people find you? Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and hey, and say, like, I want to get on this whole 3 day weekend bandwagon. But more importantly, then who are the right types of people to reach out?
Sure. So for people who are just looking for the work I do around books, parenting, spirituality, that sort of stuff, they can go to wadegalt.com. So that has all my books, online courses. Some of them are free, some of them are not. And then as far as people who are looking to create a 3 day weekend type lifestyle, whether you're an employee, an entrepreneur, a freelancer, or anywhere in between, go to 3dayweekendclub.com.
Awesome. So we'll put links to both of those in the show notes. And I can just speak from experience. It's definitely worth putting the time and effort to figure out how to run your life with a 3 day weekend. Um, So definitely take the time to reach out to Wade, because I don't teach people that. I just live it. So if you want it, definitely reach out to Wade and do that. And thank you so much for coming on the show today, Wade. Really appreciate getting to hear your story and your thoughts and the way that you think through these things. It was invaluable for me, at least. So do you have any final words of wisdom for my audience before I hit this stop record button here?
And just be you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this. And again, 2 examples of people who are going for what they can do, and think of and, not or. I want this and that, not from a greed standpoint, but to consider a lot more things are possible than what we often give ourselves credit for. So look for the and button.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, because, and it's a better question, right? We talked earlier, better questions get better answers. If you ask, how can I have this and that? That's better than saying, how can I have this or that? So unlock the power of your thinking mind there. So again, thank you so much for coming on today, Wade.